The name of the property is the Caleb Baxter House. Caleb Baxter got the house from Edmund Hobart, which was an original grant land in the 1600s. And he's the one who built the house that you see here today. One of the more interesting things on the property is that in reading John Quincy Adams' diary, we found out that he was a friend of Caleb Baxter and visited the house here often for tea and for dinner. My husband was born here. His dad bought the house in 1940. We moved in here in about 1960 and have lived here ever since. And the house, it's an old house, needless to say. It's got lots of quirks. One person today asked me, what's the hardest thing about living in this house? And I said, keeping warm in the winter. Old houses are drafty and cold, but we still love it. And to own an old house, you have to love an old house. All of the things we've done here in the house, try to stay and keep it as original as we have found it. And hopefully our kids and our grandchildren will continue it after we're gone.
This is called the Isaac Lane House. The property that the house is built on was owned by the Fearing family, one of the old original settlers from the 1640s. The house was not built until 1810, and it was built by Isaac Lane, who had acquired the property from the Fearings after they'd owned it for 180 years as farmland. It is fairly typical of the early 1800s house. It was built essentially as a duplex. The wall over there was the dividing line between one property and the other property, so it would have been a two-family house for a few years. This room that we're standing in is the original kitchen. I think one of the really interesting things about the house is over on the wall behind the door, the owners found when they were doing the renovation that there was a written text inside the wall that indicates that the house was repaired in 1857 by Luther Sprague, and that they had repaired the house, and it lists the people who worked on it, and it's kind of a cool thing to have discovered in the middle of the renovation.
Called the Raymond home. The house was built in 1925, and there have been about 7 or 8 owners in the home. The present owners have been here for 8 years. They have kept this room as it was. They have modernized the other room, and you'll see they have knocked down a lot of walls. The reason this house is in the historical tour is because of the significance of who came to visit this home. And the person was Eleanor Roosevelt. She came in 1942. She was asked to come by Francis McGregor, and Francis McGregor and her publishing company asked Eleanor if she would please do the writing for a book they wanted to produce. Eleanor said, yes, I will do that. She came to the home, she had lunch here, and wrote the book, This is America. It was all decided in this house with the owner, Francis McGregor, who is a photographer.
This is the General Benjamin Lincoln House. He's probably the most famous of the 14 generations of Lincolns who have lived here. Its importance to the town of Hingham centers on General Lincoln's involvement in primarily the Revolutionary War. He was one of Washington's generals, very close to Washington. He accepted Cornwallis's sword at the surrender at Yorktown, which is depicted in the painting in the Capitol Rotunda. He was also a citizen and a civic person in this town. He was one of the founders in 1804 of the New North Church, which is just outside the window across Fountain Square.
He was born in this house, as his father had been and his father before him. He passed away here in 1810. He's buried up behind the Old Ship Church. As a civic leader in the town of Hingham, he had been on the Board of Selectmen. He was a Hingham town clerk. He moved ahead after the Revolutionary War and became the first Secretary of Defense. He was one of George Washington's closest personal friends. People aren't really aware of that. But he and Washington conversed via letters right up until about a day before Washington passed away. And there are several hundred copies of those letters available. He also was very close with Alexander Hamilton, Henry Knox, whom he helped support in the latter years of his life. So many of the central figures of the Revolutionary War, including Dr. Joseph Warren and he, were very close. The strategies and the implementation of all these battle situations in and around Boston, the siege of Boston by the colonials, and then the eventual departure of the British fleet were directly attributed to General Lincoln's expertise. And he commanded the militia troops from Roxbury and made things happen. He also, after the Revolutionary War, was appointed by President Washington as the commander of the New England militia and took a force out to the western part of the state and embattled a group that was called the Shays Rebellion. And he put down the rebellion with 4,000 troops. And it was not well known, but certainly at the time it was an extremely important venture having to do with the success and the continuation of the American government as we know it.
Peter is the Captain Emeritus of the Hingham Militia. He's been with the militia since the reconstitution of the militia in 1975, in advance of the bicentennial. And Jerry Hazeltine has a special relationship to General Lincoln in that they are related.